Hello and welcome back to the Sour Popcorn Podcast.
A weekly show regarding all things entertainment, including reviews. Before we get started on anything, we'd like to draw attention to the fact that we haven't been around for, I think it's been nearly 2 weeks now, and this has been because of schoolwork and some commitments that we've had to see through. We apologise for the hiatus, and while it has been necessary, we hope it won't be something that happens regularly.
Getting right into the news, Zachary Levi has been cast as Shazam in DCEU.
It's the DCEU, actually. They don't like it being called the DCEU, just to correct you there. I'm not happy about Shazam at all. I mean, I didn't think this movie was going to go well in the first place. It seems like they've been pushing it back forever. And now that they've finally made a big casting decision, I couldn't be more disappointed. I don't like Zachary Levi at all. I don't think he's a good actor. And I don't think he's going to be the right fit for the character.
I really like him in Chuck because I love the show Chuck. But it sort of shows the state that DC's in at the moment, because Marvel has Zachary Levi as literally a character that's not on screen for 5 minutes. And then DC have him as this big staple, one of their main heroes. And Marvel just like, sweep him under the rug.
That was something that I was really hoping DC was going to do for this movie, was cast someone big, because it's a big part of the comics how Shazam and Superman, they're regularly equals, and I'd like to have seen someone of star status be brought in to try and contend with which, like, not only get people interested in this movie and the DCU as it is, but also to maybe like see some kind of like solo movie where it is Superman and Shazam together. Like, if you've got a star big enough, and if this movie does well enough to make something like that happen. But I don't think Zachary Levi can do that at all. Like, when I've seen him in things like Heroes Reborn, which was the last thing I can remember him being in, he was dreadful in it, and he was one of the worst parts of that series. So to see him kind of come in and play a character that's got like a really boyish charm and kind of like no adult sensibility, it's not something I think he can pull off.
I think it is, because that's essentially the character he plays in Chuck. That is essentially Chuck. But from what you were saying about the star power, I think that's exactly why they brought The Rock in for Suicide Squad 2, because they know it's a sinking ship.
The Rock saves franchises.
Just look at Fast and Furious.
Yeah.
But I think he's going to do a good job, because I enjoy him. He's got good comedic timing. He's funny. Have you seen the fan art of someone sketched him as Shazam?
No, I haven't. I'd like to see that though. Has he got a hood?
No.
Thank God, because I think people putting him in a hood looks dreadful. He just needs the little shoulder cape.
But he looks really good in it. I was quite surprised, because when it was first announced, I just pictured Chuck with the long hair, but then in the fan art, it looks like him. He has shorter hair, and he's in the suit. And he definitely looks the part.
Well, I'll maybe hold off on some criticism then. I mean, it's so early to be able to speculate about this movie that we don't even know who's directing it. We don't know if the likes of Dwayne Johnson is going to be in it. I just felt worried when I heard his name pop up. In other news this week, Amazon has been in recent talks with the Tolkien Foundation and has, for a hefty sum, acquired the rights to make a Lord of the Rings prequel TV series.
Of all the things, why Lord of the Rings? Because it was such a successful, like, original trilogy, and then The Hobbits surely showed that it was going in the wrong direction with where they wanted to take it. But it'd be interesting to see which stories they want to tell, if it's just in the world of Lord of the Rings, or if it's specific parts of the books that they want to elaborate on. Because the games are doing really well. The games are really good.
Yeah, definitely.
But it just seems like an odd thing. But I suppose Amazon are looking for those big top franchises that they can use to properly propel their video service.
Yeah, that's just my big problem with this though, because of all the properties to propel something forward with, Lord of the Rings is probably one of the worst ones, because everyone still remembers the original trilogy that everyone loves. Everyone still thinks of Ian McKellen as Gandalf, Elijah Wood as Frodo. And to try and tell a new story, you're going to have a hard time bringing anyone in, because a lot of the other Tolkien books are not well praised. Besides maybe The Silmarillion, which is a really great prequel book, there isn't going to be much that's going to bring people in. And especially when we live in this fantasy culture that is dominated by Game of Thrones, I think it's suicide for any big company to try to bring out another mainstream fantasy show that's got a massive budget when Game of Thrones is still in existence, because that's just what's going to be compared to. And when this show has shortcomings, which it naturally will, people are just going to look at Game of Thrones as a better alternative.
I was telling you the other week how I love Game of Thrones, but one of the things that annoys me is in the advertising for pretty much every new big budget show, it just says the new Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And I can just imagine it being put on the advertising for this one.
Oh god, yeah.
Where it shouldn't be trying to be Game of Thrones. It should be trying to be its own thing and tell unique stories with the fantasy genre, rather than just trying to be a clone copy and take the success of it.
Which is a little bit ironic in itself, given that Game of Thrones is a carbon copy and purely inspired by Lord of the Rings itself, which is unfortunate, but I'd like to see who they get in to make this. I hope they hold it back for a little while. It'd be nice to see something like this come in maybe after we've had the final season of Game of Thrones, so that it's like a little bit of a...
It gives people a hunger for it.
Yeah, definitely. It'll be a bit of a filler before they bring out their spin-off shows, whenever that's going to happen. And I think whatever story they tell, they're going to need a great cast for this. Like, they'll need someone who fits in well with fantasy. And that is something that I think on a lot of TV shows at the moment, like, to name but one, that Shannara Chronicles, is that even how you pronounce it? That came out. None of the actors were good for that, and I think that's why it failed.
Game of Thrones is essentially War of the Roses with a Lord of the Rings skin on it. That's essentially what it is.
And a Pornhub feature.
Thanks for that.
No problem.
What sort of format would you want this to be in? Would you want it to be a more American, like 23 episodes, or would you want it to be more hour-long episodes, but only like 10 in a series?
Yeah, I personally believe it should be like hour-long 10-episode series. That's the reason why Game of Thrones does so well, because they know they've got a short season, they can put lots of money into it. And it's also, I think, good because it means they put a lot of work into those like episodes. They make sure those 10 episodes are great. For me, the 22 episode format isn't going to work with this kind of show. Number one, because on those kind of seasons you get so many filler episodes, and because this is Lord of the Rings, it is quite possibly the biggest fantasy world ever made. They're going to need to be putting so much money into this to just be able to capture even a fraction of what Middle-earth is really like. So to give it so many episodes and then to potentially see a fall in budget for certain episodes is going to be something that really distracts and annoys a lot of the fans. So I think it really will need to be in something where it is 10 episodes.
Do you reckon they are just going to use the old sets from the films? Because they're still knocking about on, like, when they do the like studio tours.
Yeah.
So
I'd love to see them, but at the same time, I think it's just going to be too distracting. I think if you use the Shire set, if you use iconic ones like Rivendell, fans are going to immediately think, oh god, why aren't I watching the more superior version? And especially if this is a prequel series or something we've never seen before, hopefully it won't feel the need to.
So the new Jodie Whittaker costume's been announced. Well, been revealed for the 13th Doctor, and I just want to ask why. It doesn't seem... Obviously the Doctor's never had a good sense of fashion, but this just seems impractical for running about, and it seems like they've thought too much about what the design of the costume is going to be, because instead of it just looking like it's all been thrown together, it has loads of homages, like the same colours of the scarf, of Tom Baker's scarf, and then the straps from Matt Smith's, and then it still looks cobbled together, but it relies too much on the past rather than trying to stand out by itself.
I personally liked the costume. I thought it was something that was different. I'm always a fan of long coat Doctors, so I like seeing that come back. I wasn't the biggest fan of the trousers, but that's a really small problem. I think she's certainly gotten herself a bit of a unique image. Like, it's very not what I was expecting her to be seen in, especially when we saw the premiere trailer, like the reveal one of her, and she was wearing somewhat of Capaldi's outfit. So I didn't know what to expect from her, but I did like this one. Something I do hate from the fans, though, is that instead of spending time focusing on her outfit and how great it is to see a female Doctor like this, we're focusing more on the fact that the bloody sign on the TARDIS behind it has turned black.
I'm quite interested by that because it's a lot like some of the classic ones, and then like they've changed the lamp on the top, and it's just interesting to see a new design of the TARDIS because we've had this one since 2010, and it's with a few alterations. But we're also getting a new TARDIS interior, so I think maybe that's
something else.
Yeah,
focus more on the interior. Don't worry about the outside. It's always going to look basically the same. She's got a brand new outfit. Looks really good in it, and I don't think enough people are paying attention to that. Worry about the TARDIS when we see an interior shot. Focus on her more now, though, because I don't think enough people have been. I mean, I've even seen people out wearing the t-shirt she's wearing, and I think that's great that that's incorporated into her outfit. Something that some people may even potentially already be wearing, and can think, crap, I'm related to it.
I think one of the reasons why people are talking about the TARDIS more is because while the costume seems to have been very divisive on either people absolutely love it or they absolutely hate it, whereas the TARDIS, a lot of people are going, oh, look at that change, that's quite interesting, I quite like that. And then there's been quite a positive reaction from fans about the change of the TARDIS. So I think that's sort of people trying to go, oh, don't worry about the costume for the time being. Oh, look, a lovely new TARDIS design.
I'd be more interested to see what the new screwdriver looks like. Is she going to keep Capaldi's, or will she go on to a new one? I personally hope it's a new one.
Yeah, so do I, because I like to see what different designers do and where they go with it. And
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And especially when we spent so long with like Eccleston and Tennant's blue one, it was amazing to then see a shift to the green. It'd be great to see like another colour shift. You know, this fandom's got very little to talk about when one of the most interesting things we can speculate over is a potential colour change of a sonic screwdriver.
Well, this Friday they're revealing a clip for Children in Need of the Christmas special, so hopefully that'll be good and entice people, because my mum's been turned off Doctor Who for a while because she just thinks it's getting stale, and obviously that's why they're handing over the reins to Chibnall. But I really enjoyed Series 10. It was sort of a return to form. I mean, it wasn't an outstanding series, but World Enough in Time was one of the best episodes we've had in years.
100%.
So I'm just looking forward to that. But one of the things that I love about this costume, even though I'm not keen on it, they did not sexualise the Doctor.
Yeah, that was something I was really happy to see. I was expecting her to maybe even be in a skirt and like have heels on, to see her in like combat boots and then like having like trousers on and just like things like braces. It doesn't relate too heavily to her being a man, but it is to me like what the modern woman looks like, and that was something that I was excited by.
Yeah, because none of the Doctors have ever worn anything that could in any way resemble anything that's quite risque.
Yeah.
Obviously there have been points where like Matt Smith was getting out his costume and then it's like, you're going to look away? No. But the actual costume itself was very traditional, and I think that's one of the things that is sort of putting me off of this costume, because it seems like very modern and contemporary fabrics rather than like the Victorian thick tweed and like the leather jacket.
Exactly.
It seems very more modern, and if that's the direction they're going with it, then that's perfectly fine. But it's just, I think, getting used to the change rather than it being a horrible costume, because it's not terrible.
No, definitely not. And one thing this show can 100% do is change the costume if it's got a problem. They did it with Smith, they did it with Capaldi, it can be done with Whittaker.
They change the lead actors every couple of years, of course they can just change the costume. New Star Wars news, Zach. A little indie film that I was telling you about the other day, Star Wars.
I've never heard of it. Do you think is it going to be big? Is it going to be big?
I reckon it's going places.
Yeah. Keeping an eye on these Star Wars guys. They know what they're doing.
Rian Johnson, obviously director of The Last Jedi, that's coming out soon. Well, a couple months. And he directed Looper as well. He's been given full reins for the next trilogy.
It's not going to be a Skywalker trilogy. It's going to be completely new. They've said it won't have the Skywalkers in it. It will be a new set of characters. It will be a new part of the galaxy. And that's why I'm so interested in it. It's going to be its own separate thing, similar to how the Rogue One and the Solo movie are spin-offs, but they still relate to the main story. This will be a spin-off that is new. It's new characters. It will introduce a new 3-arc storyline to go across. I know he is writing all 3. I don't know if he's directing all 3, but the first one is definitely being helmed by him. And I think it will be brilliant to see him bring in a new sense of like wonder and something new to this universe, especially if we're going to go into a Star Wars film and there's things where there's like no Jedi, there's no Sith, there's no Skywalkers, it's just something completely new. That's what really interests me about this.
I think what they're going to do with the Skywalker trilogies is they're still going to be the main staples of the franchise, obviously. But I think after episode 9, they're then going to pull back for a bit. Obviously release like a few, like this Rian Johnson trilogy. But then they're going to want to build up that hype like they did for The Force Awakens. And then they're just going to like be like episode 10. So I reckon they don't want to make it stale with the main trilogy, because obviously Rogue One didn't do as well as Force Awakens, but I don't even think The Last Jedi is going to do as well as The Force Awakens. But The Force Awakens did so well because it built up that hype, because there hadn't been Star Wars in ages. And the same thing happened with The Phantom Menace.
Yeah, exactly. I think you'll never achieve the success of, like, financially of The Force Awakens, but I think you can critically, and I think you can in terms of audience enjoyment. I feel that it's for that reason that's why this new trilogy is going to do so well. Like, when Rogue One came out, I said, this is where we're going to start seeing Disney running Star Wars into the ground, because they produced what wasn't a great movie, what was a movie filled with a lot of fan service, and what was a movie that made millions. So it's nice to see that they come out, and if they're going to give us a new Star Wars every single year until we hate it, bring out a new movie where it's something fresh each time, and it's something that we haven't seen before, because that's what's going to bring in new audiences, that's what's going to bring in more fans, not just stories about the same family that there are barely any members of left anymore, and hopefully after episode 9 will be wrapped up. So I think it is great to see Ryan come out and make something new.
I think one of the reasons why Marvel's kept going for so long, well, it's a decade at this point, is, well, nearly a decade. Nearly a decade.
Year.
Yeah, nearly a decade at this point, is because while each film has the quippy one-liners and they could be considered very similar, they do branch out with, like, Winter Soldier being a great espionage story, and then Ragnarok being an all-out comedy, and then changing all the different, having subgenres within it. So Han Solo looks like it's going the way of a comedy. So if they just shake it up and keep it interesting, then I'm excited.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one thing we can definitely say about this new trilogy is what an endorsement to Rian Johnson. Like, Last Jedi must be amazing if they're willing to give him this. If they think... I mean, he's not a man who's made a lot of films, Rian Johnson. Like, he's done Looper and... Brick, yeah. I mean, for him to then be said, you can go on and you can make our multi-million-dollar franchise anew, that's a real endorsement, isn't it? I mean, it's got to be a real testament to how well he's made this movie and the clear confidence that they have in him going forward.
I saw his tweet afterwards that just perfectly... He just said, obviously I hoped you'd like The Last Jedi anyway, but now I really hope you like The Last Jedi.
That's amazing.
Speaking of Star Wars, The Last Jedi, do you want to talk about the whole cinema thing? Disney's being a Disney.
Yeah, I think this is a really disturbing trend that Disney is, like, developing, and I hope this is something we don't see going on. Disney is releasing, like, deals that for every cinema that The Last Jedi is played at, there are certain rules that come with it. Disney will receive, for every ticket sold, 65% of the revenue from the theatres. And that's at least 25% more than most theatres, because they get about 55%, the studio does, and then the theatre can use the rest. That's a major profit margin that Disney is then taking back when they're already going to be making millions anyway. And I think it shows a great deal of greed on their part. But what's also troubling is the fact that they are told they have to keep The Last Jedi in theatres for 4 weeks if they want to show it at the very least. Otherwise, Disney will then take 5% of everything they've made, and that isn't just on the movie, that's on the any merchandise they may give away, popcorn things, any posters and stuff. So they'll take 5% of everything, and this can potentially bankrupt some really small cinemas. And it's also dreadful because when you look at the really big cinemas, like the ones in LA that want to, as the year draws to a close and after the hype for The Last Jedi has died out, want to play the more Oscar movies that are coming out, want to play the big premieres, they're not going to be able to, because they're going to have to keep Last Jedi as their main movie, as their title screening. And I think this is just dreadful that Disney is just essentially dominating and corrupting the industry like this by essentially tying their hands. We know you're going to want this in your cinema, but you're only having it if you do as we say. I think it's dreadful.
And I think this is such a shame because it might just wear people out of The Last Jedi and Star Wars. Because if they do that with every Star Wars film, it'll just be like, oh, yeah, that's still in cinema. And then if a new release comes out, it'll be like, the cinema has to show it at an awkward time because The Last Jedi still has main title screening. So it's just not healthy, because if it's not making the cinema any more money, then they obviously, because there isn't an interest in it anymore, then they're going to want to pull it back and put something else there.
And something else it'll also do is it'll cause critical outlash. When it was 2015 and when Force Awakens was coming out, that was been the same deal. That was going on for quite a few months. But when Tarantino released The Hateful Eight, he wanted this played in a major cinema in LA. And because Disney said no, it's got to stay there, Tarantino got into a real kind of public outcry. This has been here already a month. I think I should have the right to play my movie. The cinema even wanted to have it played. But because of Disney, who then went and said Tarantino badmouths us, people started boycotting The Hateful Eight. People started throwing real hate at it. And that was one of the best movies of 2015. So to see something else potentially happen on the same scale again this year would be really quite worrying, especially given how great some of the movies have been this year. To see the Oscar movies then receive hate and potential problem from moviegoers is a really horrible trend that I hope we don't start seeing more.
Another dodgy Disney business practice is the LA Times wrote an article about some strange goings-ons with Disney and the state that Disney World's in, the US state that it's in, and how it does some certain things with a car park, because Disney pay the local council $1 a year for this car park, and it cost over 100 million, I think, for the taxpayers to build this car park. And then they published this article about Disney, and then they wanted to start doing preview screenings for their critics. So then they have reviews ready, and they can just go out. And then they had all the other major studios there, but Disney said, no, we're not going to show you our films. We're not going to show you. No, we're not going to give you them as previews. You'll get them as the public get them because of this article, because it was biased, because this, that, and the other. And we tried to give you the correct information. And then the reporter came out and said, we tried to contact you a number of times, but you never gave us anything. And it all went on like that until eventually a number of review sites started to boycott Disney films and said, we're not going to have a big impact on Disney, but we're going to use the only power that we do have over them. And that's the free advertisement from doing reviews for them and talking about the new trailers that they put out. And so then a lot of review sites were then boycotting them until Disney in the end came to a private agreement with the LA Times. This is just dodgy business 101.
Yeah, I think it's really stupid on Disney's part. It's really petty on that front as well. Tax evasion and money is a thing aside, but to openly ban a critic just because they've badmouthed you in not a major sense it's just so, like, I hate to say petty again, but it's just that entirely. Like, and then for other people to then jump on this bandwagon and agree with the news reporters, I think is really commendable, because it does say, like, clearly, like, we're not going to put up for things like this. I feel Disney has overstepped the mark with this kind of behaviour, and I think it's important that they realise that.
It seems very much like Disney's the big guy trying to squash the little guy, but then they didn't realise that, no, because they said something unfavourable about them, even though they showed their facts and they showed their reporting afterwards, it just doesn't seem right at all. And that sort of worries me, because 20th Century Fox has gone up for sale, and Disney is rumoured to be buying it, or in talks for buying it. And while on the surface level that seems like it would be good, with like the X-Men going over into the MCU.
It wouldn't just be that, you get the Fantastic Four as well, and they need a good movie made.
Exactly. And then you then think they would then literally have
everything,
most of the dominance of film for the big blockbusters. It would literally just be Disney and Warner Bros for the most part. Like,
yeah, and then Sony's off the side a tiny bit, but even then they're getting into bed together with Homecoming, so
yeah,
it just becomes quite ridiculous when Disney has got that much.
And as much as I do want to see the X-Men and the Fantastic Four in the MCU, Zach made a point that Disney aren't really looking for the smaller character films like Logan.
Yeah, exactly.
Because imagine if X-Men was over at Disney, we wouldn't have got that masterpiece.
No, we would never receive something else like Deadpool. We wouldn't get anything like Logan. It would be PG-13 if it was going to be released. Like, not that Disney is all flowers and rainbows. They don't make that kind of content. They just don't.
Because look at Marvel, they wanted to make something adult, so then they had to go over to Netflix.
Yeah, exactly. Like, to have to make another deal with another company just to have something produced in a specific style that you want really just sends the sign that if this deal goes ahead, Logan is the last great movie like that we're going to see, because Disney won't make things like that. They'll be interested in like throwing in the X-Men, the Fantastic Four into the franchise that they've already got, and that's a children's franchise. Like, yeah, you get the shit and you get the language and you get the violence every now and then, but you never get much that's going to scar or really upset the family audiences, so you're going to see a lot more like junior versions of these X-Men and the Fantastic Four, and we won't get things like Logan again.
Don't get me wrong, I love the MCU, I love the films in it, but not every film has to be like that. No. Which then makes it interesting when there are ones that go out against this, like Logan and like Deadpool, which is what Fox seems to be doing. Like, we wouldn't get the New Mutants, we wouldn't get a horror film in that sort of sense. It would be a small Netflix show, or actually no, because Disney's trying to make their own streaming service and take away the Netflix original Marvel shows. So,
well, maybe that's somewhere where we can start to see a little bit more of like adult entertainment. Like, Netflix has the Defenders series. Maybe we can start to see a trend like that appearing on this streaming service. Like, it may not happen, but at least if it's going to happen, I'd like to see it there, especially if they are going to be using characters like Deadpool and potentially Wolverine, which I hope they don't in the future.
Like, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. isn't a kids program, but then again, it's not as bad as Jessica Jones. It's not as adult as Jessica Jones. So whether that would then all be watered down,
we just don't know.
We don't know at this point.
It also stands to reason that we could see this kind of thing happening on all the properties that Fox owns. Like, if Disney suddenly decides that when they look at shows like Family Guy or Always Sunny, which they will then have the rights to, if they decide they don't want this in their library, they are within every right to get rid of it. And that's a real shame, because while I admit Family Guy hasn't been great in years, shows like Always Sunny that has got still a great fan base and it's still being well written.
I absolutely love it.
Yeah, Jake here, he's a massive fan of it. To see that then taken away just because the company doesn't like it and it's not part of their policy and brand would be dreadful, because that is a really great and well-made show. Because
20th Century Fox, while they don't make all the best films in the world, with their TV shows, they have FX and then they have Fox. So FX is their more experimental one where they have Archer and then they have
Fargo and American Horror Story.
Exactly. And then Fox is where they put their big main staples and their big main shows. And then without that, Disney isn't really experimenting with it the same. They're not going out and they're not trying to subvert things and do interesting stuff. Whereas, for example, 20th Century Fox has Fox Searchlight, which do smaller indie films like Juno and The Grand Budapest Hotel.
Exactly.
Which are absolutely phenomenal. Whereas Disney are more the big main blockbusters. Whereas with 20th Century Fox, it is very much they have the small subsidiaries that do their own different things and their own little niches that then build up into the big 20th Century Fox.
Exactly. And I mean, this is a company where the most inventive title they can come up with for a Han Solo movie is Solo. So to lose that amount of creativity, to lose that amount of daring experimentation is a real crime, in all honesty, because films like Logan, which will prove in time to be an absolute classic, let alone one of the best films of this year, to not see another film like that because the studio is willing to take a risk on it, because it's like Fox and they can take that artistic liberty, they can be like more violent and rude, to then see it be brought over to Disney is a real worrying kind of thing, especially with how much money Disney's already got. Do they need something else like this?
I feel like we are very much shitting on Disney in this episode.
Yeah, like...
But we do like the movies they put out, except they don't experiment as much as other studios. No, they know what works. They've tried it. They've got a tried and tested formula. They change things here and there which do make it interesting and do make enjoyable films. And they do really good films. Yeah. But then not everyone doesn't want a blockbuster all the time. Like, people want their Grand Budapest Hotels and they want all their niche films rather than everything being on this corporate blueprint.
Exactly. Yeah, when the likes of Coco comes out, I will be singing Disney's praises. But when they're giving behaviour like this, like we've seen with the theatre incidents and the LA Times scandal, and then we see things like this, it does just make you question Disney a little bit. Like, how much power have they got, and do they just need to take a bit of a step back and think about things?
Like when Disney first acquired Lucasfilm with the Star Wars brand, people were saying how this is a terrible decision and they hate Disney, and I didn't understand it because I thought, well, Disney's great and it's the best thing for the franchise. And while Lucasfilm going over to Disney was in fact very beneficial for Star Wars, they also did change a lot of things and they cancelled some stuff, and they very much made it their own. So that sort of begs the question of what are they likely to cancel if they do get 20th Century Fox, and what are they likely to keep?
Let's just hope that as this story progresses, FX and the likes of those great comedy shows and movies that Fox does make doesn't go the way of LucasArts, and we see potentially great material be lost. Now we're going to conclude the news this week where we discuss some recent sexual scandals that have appeared in the news. We made comments regarding this last week, but we said we weren't going to discuss it because we wanted to take some time to learn the full facts and to see if these allegations were handled properly and if they were in fact true, which they now of course clearly are. So we'll now be discussing recent accusations that have been made against the likes of Kevin Spacey, Louis C.K., Brett Ratner, and just yesterday, in fact, George Takei. We'll be going one by one and discussing kind of what happened and how we feel about this, and then moving on to the next, because this isn't a subject that we feel overly comfortable discussing, but it's important that we respect the people that were hurt and that we do discuss it. So to start, we have Kevin Spacey. He was accused by a member of, I can't remember his name unfortunately, the Star Trek Discovery cast.
Anthony Rapp, yeah.
That's the one. He came forward and accused Kevin Spacey of how should I put it, sexual misconduct. Like, he propositioned him and was quite aggressive with him when he was a teenager. And Kevin Spacey later on Twitter, while he did apologise for the action, said that this was disgusting, he also used the opportunity to come out, as it were, and say that he is a homosexual. He now decides to live as a gay man. And some controversy was, of course, caused because of this, because this was seen as kind of a deflection, how he was using this to cover up what he'd done.
This is probably one of the first times I've ever seen, like, the LGBTQ community reject someone for coming out.
Yeah.
Because he did it in such a distasteful way. He used it as almost an excuse for his actions.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That's not at all what it's about.
I think the more shocking thing is the fact that instead of, like, I'm sure Anthony Rapp is an easily got a hold of man, like, you could have called him, arranged something like that. I don't think you need to have said anything on Twitter. Like, taking that time, like, just use it to apologise. If you're going to have to say something, just apologise, say what I've done is wrong.
And then,
don't
like,
use
the next
that.
Week,
yeah.
If he apologised to him publicly as well as privately, and then the next week, because he felt like he wanted to tell people, and because he felt that it was his time to come out, if he then came out, then people would have supported him.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I found disgusting, the headlines to start off with, instead of being these allegations have been made against Kevin Spacey, it was Academy Award winning actor Kevin Spacey comes out as gay.
Yeah, it's a real sign of what our media is like when they can focus on something like that far more than they can actual potential rape. Like, to see someone go through something like that, all the attention should be on the likes of Anthony Rapp. It should not be on Spacey. Like, people should be paying attention to what happened to this man, how he can be made better moving forward, and how the industry can learn lessons from what Spacey has done in the future. And also, I think the only real thing you can look to for Spacey to learn from is for how actors can conduct themselves, and if they ever find themselves in a situation like this, and learn that places like Twitter or social media are not the correct grounds to be making statements like this about.
John Bernthal said he was on a radio show for The Punisher. He said that while on the set for Baby Driver, he used to look up to Kevin Spacey. He was one of his idols, one of the reasons why he got into acting in the first place. And he said that on set of Baby Driver, Kevin Spacey was just a bully, and he said that he remembers him completely rubbing him the wrong way, and he said that he lost a ton of respect, and he said he didn't know anything about this sexual allegation stuff that's come out, but he said that it just completely, he used to look up to this man.
Yeah, as do we.
And how he conducted himself on set, he said it wasn't professional.
Yeah.
And it was petty.
Yeah. Also, with Kevin Spacey, given that this story has been brought forward, Netflix has unfortunately decided to make the next season of House of Cards the final one. This is devastating to me because it is my favourite Netflix show. It's arguably one of my favourite television shows ever. It's an extremely well-made production, and it's really upsetting to see such an amazing actor go from it, but that's only necessary given what he's done. It's very upsetting, though, because for a time it seemed as though House of Cards was just going to be cancelled, and that's devastating to think that loads of people can be losing their jobs because of the actions of one man, but it's hence been decided that it will not be cancelled. The next season will just be the final one, which I don't have a problem with because I believe Robin Wright can handle that ship herself. I've said it from season 1, she is the best character and actress on that show, and can more than well carry the ship and go forward with it, because she will not only bring out a final season that is amazing, but I think will give something that's so good that the memories of him and his absence from the show aren't dwelled on too long, because he doesn't deserve attention like that now.
When Netflix first halted production, they then got the whole cast and the crew in, and they were like, so does everyone feel safe? Does everyone feel comfortable? And that's something that I really respect Netflix for. But with all these stories and these allegations coming out against all these people in the entertainment industry, it does beg the question of how close are the actors to their work? Like, how can you still enjoy their work even though this has come out? Because I absolutely adore and love the movie Seven.
Yeah.
But what does that then mean moving forward with watching it now that this has come out about it? Because it's not like other reality stars that stuff's come out in the past. These are classic films rather than just reality shows. These are classic films, and it sort of begs the question, what does this mean?
It the same way again?
Yeah. And will it then not be shown on TV with reruns? And does it then make it not okay to watch it because of what the actor's done?
Or do we look at the merits of the cast and the director in some cases and everyone else who worked on it?
Because, for example, a Ridley Scott film that was coming out in just over a month, just after Christmas.
Yeah.
They completely removed Kevin Spacey from it. They recast him. I can't remember who they recast him with. Christopher Plummer. And that's... Christopher Plummer's the man that Ridley Scott originally wanted in the film to play this character. But then Sony said, no, we want a bigger name. And then now this has come out. Ridley Scott went to Sony and said, I don't want him in the film. I want to reshoot it. Because from what it sounds like, he was very much isolated in his scenes when it was just him. Yeah. And Sony said, yeah, that's fine. And I think the film will be better for it. And it will also... I think it's gained the film attention that it wasn't necessarily going to get.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it doesn't seem like it's going to be a big blockbuster. It seemed more like it was going to be critically received well, and it was more Oscar baity than it was going for the money.
Exactly.
So I think that was a good decision on Sony's behalf.
It really was. It's a shame as well that we can't sort of see the same trend happening with other films, because another person that's come out and has been accused is Louis C.K. He was accused of...
Louis C.K. was accused of sexual misconduct, where people say he didn't try and put himself on them, but
there was propositioning and...
They said that he propositioned something and the two up-and-coming comedians thought he was joking, so they said, oh yeah, sure. Then actually started doing it, but he never did anything to them, he just did it to himself.
Yeah.
And another person that came forward said that she was talking to him on the phone and then she could hear him doing it.
Yeah.
And he has... this all came out on the day of his premiere of the film I Love You Daddy, which is a film we've previously spoken about. We spoke about the trailer and we said, we were looking forward to it.
Yeah.
But he cancelled the premiere and he's come out and said, yes, this happened. I'm not making any excuses for it. What I did was wrong. And I think he's just going away for a bit to sort of get himself together, get his act together, sort himself out and make sure that he doesn't do it again.
And it's a real shame, because while I Love You Daddy wasn't going to be a classic, it was still a movie that people worked on, that they should be paid for, that the likes of Chloe Moretz and Rose Byrne, they put a lot of their time into. While he doesn't deserve his moment in the sun ever again, in my opinion, the likes of the actors and the crew and the cast that was involved in this movie does, because they worked hard on this, and it's a shame that their efforts are essentially again spoiled by one man's heinous actions.
I think while people have their opinions on if he should come back and if he should, like you said, have his moment in the sun, I think he will, because he'll let this go and he'll take a moment out to then let people digest it, and then he'll come back
with a new look on the situation, I think.
Yeah, because he is one of the biggest comedians in the world at the moment. And I don't think that because it wasn't sexual assault, it was just misconduct. That's not me saying that what he did was fine. Yeah. But that's me saying that I think that people will still enjoy his content, and I see people giving him a second chance if he has genuinely changed.
Yeah. I think there's always room to give someone a second chance in this industry. And while this man is someone who is quite a high stature, like he's a really well-known comedian, like an actor and a director, and the same with Brett Ratner, as we'll soon find out, like a big director, I personally think while there is room to give them a second chance, I feel you just do something where it's like, yeah, you can come back, but you're at the bottom now. Like, you're a stagehand or you're a production worker. Like, you don't get these big projects again. Like, you've got to work back up. And really, you've got to do what's right, and you've kind of got to restore our faith and trust in you, because if Louis C.K. can come out and apologise like he has, other people should be able to do the same, and then put the rest of their career forward, if they still want to be a part of this industry, which clearly a number of them would, go forward and try and re-establish what they've essentially ruined, which is our trust in them. Take time to restore the quality of their craft and make us want to see them again, because we now trust and respect them again, and not just come back and say like, oh, I'm still Louis C.K., oh, I'm still Brett Ratner, give me all this. Brett Ratner is now someone we will be discussing, and he was accused quite largely of inappropriate behaviour and language, and my particular example that I'll be citing on this occasion is that of Ellen Page, who played Shadowcat in the X-Men franchise, and she specifically cites to X-Men The Last Stand, where she was repeatedly, like, essentially bullied by Ratner, who, like, repeatedly said things to her like along the lines of, oh, who do I have to get to sleep with you before you realise you're gay? And while that's inappropriate by itself, that's disgusting for someone to have to hear, I think it's even more upsetting because Ellen Page at the time had not come out to herself, and to have someone like this force their kind of thinking on you and insult you for not really yet knowing who you are, that's disgusting, like, for anyone to think about saying. And for that to happen, I think is clear justification why the likes of Brett Ratner shouldn't be in that industry or around people where he can make that kind of comment.
It's sort of, with Kevin Spacey and with Brett Ratner, it shows the two contrasts, because Kevin Spacey, his work and what he's done, his performances he's given are really good. That's one of the reasons why before these stories came out, he was one of our favourite actors.
Exactly.
Whereas it's not even like Brett Ratner makes particularly good films.
Nope.
Like, at all. And there's the story that Gal Gadot said how she's not going to sign on for the next Wonder Woman sequel if Brett Ratner's still involved in the franchise. And while neither Brett Ratner or Gal Gadot have actually confirmed this, it was just an inside source on a newspaper.
Yeah.
I think it is still sending the right message, even if it's not something that's actually happened.
Yeah.
Because Gal Gadot is now seen as such a big feminist icon.
Yeah, exactly. Like, to little girls, in fact. Like,
Yeah.
They go out as Halloween, they go as Wonder Woman because she is now that symbol of, like, girl power. And I think for her to come forward and take a stance on these situations, for her to say something about this, and to be someone who hasn't just, like, offered condolences to those who were affected, which is of course important that we do, but to make an actual stand. And I know there are people making stands, but to do something like this on such a public level and potentially risk your job security, because while I don't doubt they would automatically pick Gal Gadot over Brett Ratner, that is questionable for any actor or actress to do, because you do not ever know when you've reached such a level that they will consider picking you. So I think for her to take such a stance is not only brave, but very commendable.
I think that's one of the reasons why all these allegations have stayed quiet, because they have been these higher, bigger figures in the entertainment industry that they've then been scared for their own job security.
Yeah, it's like a real commentary on how big can people get before they can really be touched. Like, how
did they get this much power?
How can anyone be allowed to say something like that? Like, we look at it on a political level more than anything, but to look at it on this entertainment level, I don't think until in recent times it's given enough press and given enough attention. So to now see it have that, I think conversations and steps forward can start to see this sort of behaviour not reoccur and happen again, which, if we had our right, and as I'm sure many people would agree, it should never happen.
Also, this is only loosely related to this, between the difference between a male director and a female director of Patty Jenkins and Zack Snyder. They've released the pictures for the Amazonians from Justice League, and then they compared it to the Amazonians from Wonder Woman. And in Wonder Woman, they're wearing battle armour, and they're these strong women, whereas in Justice League, they're quite scantily dressed and they're more sexualised, and it just shows that the male gaze is still such a prominent thing in the entertainment industry and in the direction of films. And even if it was unintentional on Zack Snyder's part, it still shows how they've gone from being this powerful woman race in
like a fictional universe,
in the Wonder Woman film, to now they're very much more sexualised rather than actually being shown as strong characters. I'm sure they are strong characters. Well, I hope they are.
Yeah.
But it's not even like they started scantily dressed and then now they've got more armour. They had more armour, they had more clothes. It suited the characters because they were warriors. Whereas now, it's not even like it's more protection, it's less protection. It doesn't even fit the character and what they need.
We're now going to talk about, very quickly, the final person who has been accused. This has been within the last 24 hours. George Takei, Star Trek star, he played Mr. Sulu in the original series, has been accused of rape. He was unavailable at the time when he was accused to have a comic, 'cause apparently he was on a plane. But since then he has, denied said allegations, doesn't understand where it's come from. And it's very unfortunate to see someone who has such a prolific stance on anti-rape, who has, said many provocative tweets to Donald Trump saying similar things. And it's unfortunate to see what is, while maybe unintended, actual hypocrisy here. It's unfortunate to see that someone like this has come out and done something like that.
It just seems like this. It all started with the Harvey Weinstein story, and then now everyone's, the victims of this are now feeling supported in coming out and telling their stories, and it just shows how corrupt the whole situation is and how people can't just stick with it anymore, and how it has to change and how it can't stay like this. Stephen Amell, the one who plays Oliver Queen in Arrow, he's come out and said, if you're not actively a part of the solution, then you are a part of the problem. Because even if you don't see it, even if you don't agree with their actions and you still think that it's wrong, if you're not actively trying to solve it, then that's still a part of the problem, and it's not progressing where people are, not progressing people into trying to fix this.
Yeah. It's both a blessing and a curse of this entire incident, how we're going to see, I'm sure in more recent weeks and months to come, we're going to see more people be brought out like this, more people that we potentially know and enjoy, and it's going to be upsetting to see them accused, and it's going to be upsetting to see the victims accused and given hate. I know Anthony Rapp's been given a great deal of hate, and it'll be unfortunate to see people have to live through these experiences again. But there is the real blessing that people will come together after this, people will become united, there will be a lot more conversations about this, there'll be a lot more activity to prevent this sort of thing happening again, and hopefully the industry will change for the better. And that's ultimately what it is all about with this industry, changing, adapting to the times. And in this modern society that we live in today, we just can't allow this behaviour. And I hope that people within the industry realise that, and that changes are made to enforce it.
Amen.
Before we discuss episode 4 of The Walking Dead, season 8, we're going to be discussing episodes 2 and 3, because we were unfortunately away when these episodes were on and we weren't able to discuss them. We'll briefly be going over them before we discuss the main highlight of this season so far, which is episode 4.
Meh. I think the fact that we don't remember precisely what happened in these episodes sort of explains a lot, because was it episode 2 Jesus and Tara had their thing?
Yeah.
And then episode 3 Morgan had his "I do not die."
Yeah. And then his like beautiful fight with Jesus, which I really enjoyed. It was a good moment.
I think both these episodes had moments. Like the episode 2 had Tara and Jesus, and then this one, episode 3, had Jesus and Morgan, and they had their moments of like the whole, oh, who was right, so that just on Talking Dead afterwards they could have a poll on who people were more inclined for.
And then they have their meme-worthy moments where they'll kill off Morales, or they'll do jokes at Gregory's dispense just so that people can make fun of it on the internet afterwards. Though we did both have problems with the Morales situation. I think the primary reason he was even brought back at all was the writers thought, damn, we haven't really got a very good conclusion to this episode. This guy's within the area, let's call him in, offer him $200 to appear for 5 minutes, and then we'll get rid of him.
Yeah, and then Daryl just straight up shot him. So while it's an interesting development for Daryl and how the events of last series completely broke him, I feel like you could have done that with a more minor character, whereas bringing back someone from series 1, yeah, it showed Rick how far he's come, what he's doing now, and is making him think about it. But they could have easily just got him to waste, like, say Morales was there with one of his mates and they both called Negan, and then Daryl came in and shot one of them, then they still had Morales, and they had like a wolf type situation, like from series 6, where they had that one wolf that they had locked up, and then he like kept taunting them and talking to them.
Something I feel they really missed with that character was back in season 3 when Andrea, who had been away with the governor, she came back into the group and was suddenly like the outsider. She didn't know, like, for instance, what had happened to Shane. She's like, oh, where's Shane? He's dead. And was like suddenly the outsider of the group. I think that would have been something really interesting to try with Morales, because now the group is so much bigger and you've only got, what is it? Yeah, now that Glenn's gone, you've only got 4 members of that original group left. So to maybe see someone literally in the show make a comment on it would have just been really interesting to see, and then just show again how far this group has really come.
Yeah, like if he came in and said, oh, I can tell you guys have had lots of series finales because you've lost most of the main cast.
Yeah.
I feel like with the way Daryl's going, especially in these 2 episodes, it felt a lot like they're going to have to do what they did for that little girl in series 5, where she couldn't tell the difference between the walkers and stuff, and she kept like...
Yeah.
Well, her problem is she didn't kill them, whereas Daryl is just going around shooting people left, right and centre. And I feel that Rick's going to have to put them down and going to have a look at the flowers moment sort of thing. And if they do have the confidence to kill off Daryl, I reckon that would be an interesting way and a good send-off for the character if done properly.
That was what the original plan for the 100th issue of The Walking Dead was. It was going to be Glenn was going to turn on Rick and threaten to kill Carl, and because Glenn had just become such a liability and a danger to the group, Rick was then going to have to murder him, which was then of course cut because they needed to put in the Negan character. But that would be something brilliant to see somewhat of symbolically brought to life on the show. Like, if you can kill off someone who has been that big to the fandom and has grown so close to Rick, it would be such a great way to pay off the character and again make his death worthwhile, other than to just bring in more attention. Episode 4 though,
the best of this series so far.
Yeah, I really genuinely enjoyed this. I mean, I've grown really, really tired of the character of Ezekiel. Like, I feel like he's just there to make speeches now and be a bit of comic relief. That's literally what he's become to me, a comic relief character. But this episode, like, the actor who plays him and the character itself was sensational. I really enjoyed what was done to him, and just seeing him be broken like that.
I absolutely love this actor, because at first I was annoyed because I wanted David Fennoy to play King Ezekiel. But it shows that they cast the right dude.
Definitely.
And Jerry was amazing. I love Jerry.
Yes.
He's just brilliant in this episode. There was a bit of a Jerry Ex Machina, as it were.
Yeah, I knew we couldn't go 5 minutes without Jane mentioning Jerry Ex Machina. Shiva, though.
We're not going spoilers yet, Zach. We're not going spoilers yet. I like this episode because it's on the smaller scale. And that's what Walking Dead does best, because the past few episodes have been all-out war. And while this is still a part of that war, it's more a character-driven story where it has, like, the moral decisions with Carol, and then it has... It's just a lot smaller moments, and that's exactly what the show does best, because the best episodes are the character-driven ones.
Yeah, exactly. It's reminding me a lot of when Season 4 returned after the mid-season finale, and you had the group divided in so many different levels. And that is some of my fondest memories of The Walking Dead, when you had these individual stories where the characters could come together and learn things, like, in pairings that we hadn't yet recently experienced. Like, they tried to do this a few episodes ago when you had Tara and Jesus, like, argue, and now they're doing it again with, like, Carol and Ezekiel, and they're going through things together and they're learning things. And it is primarily on this small scale, which is why it works so well, because it isn't... While the all-out war stuff is interesting to see, it's great action, it does harken back to what the show is at its core, which is people learning to deal with these things, people having to struggle to make decisions they don't want to, and to unfortunately lose people, which is, I think, what this episode was able to brilliantly do again. Because we haven't seen the likes of that in a long while, especially with it being the whole all-out war storyline.
And now, going into spoilers...
CG tigers are expensive, man. What were we expecting? We knew it had to go.
Robert Kirkman said on Talking Dead afterwards that when he was first debating on, should I add a tiger to it? He was like, no, I'm just thinking of how they'll actually do it in the show. This is a comic book. We can easily just draw a tiger. We're adding the tiger. They can sort out themselves on the show. But,
that's brilliant.
But again, going back to the character stuff, just how much Shiva meant to King Ezekiel, and just how all of the kingdom's, like, soldiers just gone.
Yeah.
And the effect that has on him, and then Jerry's just so like, you're a great guy, and he's just like, I'm no one, I'm not.
I'm just some guy.
Yeah.
Which is the name of the episode.
And when Ezekiel was first introduced and they had the tiger, I thought, oh God, this is just way too over the top. And then it was the heart-to-heart moment with Carol, where he dropped his persona and he became himself, and he was like, I'm just doing this for them.
No bullshit. And I think that was great how they kind of linked the ending of this episode back to that conversation, because in that conversation he says, like, how the kingdom was founded, how he had rescued Shiva, and then how they had bonded, and then how people started to follow him out of sheer respect and awe at the fact that he had essentially domesticated a tiger, something that no human would be capable of. And when you see the kingdom's forces leaving, like, the kingdom in this episode, and he's got Shiva with him, to then see him come back in with not Shiva, it's kind of symbolically how the heart of the kingdom is destroyed, because people followed him because they believe he could aspire to greatness and do things like domesticate a tiger. And now to see Shiva go and him to come back with no one besides Carol and Jerry, it was a real sign of, like, how broken not only he, the character, is, but how the community is as well.
It's great to see Jerry finally use that axe. Although, what was that chain made out of? Adamantium. Like,
you're giving yourself a lot of press for your tweets here, Jake. A lot of press.
Like, how could that axe not have broken it? Or at least, how could the chain have broken the axe? How weak was the wood and the craftsmanship in that? Like, Jerry deserves a much better made axe.
I feel like you're giving a little bit too much attention to the character of Jerry.
I love Jerry. He's brilliant.
Again, he's just comic relief, man. It's kind of another person just to fill the void.
But he does it well.
He does it well. Comment I do want to make, though, on a previous episode, because we have forgotten to say it, is the character of Aaron and Eric. I felt dreadful for Aaron that we lost Eric, but this show's biggest casualty at the moment is assuming that we care. And I did not care about Eric at all. I don't really care that much about Aaron's reaction. I like the character, but do not care about Eric at all. I like to see where it goes with the baby, though.
I love how they've given Ross Marquand the opening title credit. That was nice to notice. And I'd say with Eric, all they needed to do was, even if it was just that episode, add in like a 5-minute thing. No, not even 5 minutes. A 30-second thing of them getting ready in their house
Do what they did with the Zach character in the start of season 4. This guy's just come in, he's got a funny little jokey thing with Daryl. You think he's okay. Then you gave a little bit more of a damn when he got murdered. With Eric, you just didn't care.
Like, if they killed him when they first introduced him, in, was it series 5 or 6? Or
probably halfway through season 5, so yeah.
Yeah. If they did it when they first introduced him, like towards the end of series 5, then that would have been interesting and a lot harder, like much more of an impact, because he was still fresh in our minds, he was still doing stuff rather than just being basically absent and just in the background. Yeah. It's the same sort of similar thing that they had with Glenn, because don't get me wrong, I absolutely loved Glenn and I was devastated when he left, but throughout series 6 there was the whole thing with him on the bin on if he survived or not, and then he did nothing throughout the entirety of series 6.
Yeah, exactly.
Which then made the series 7 opener have less of an impact, which is why then as I was first watching it, I was horrified from the prosthetics and exactly what they did to him. But it was only later when I was rewatching like series 1 and 2 and 3 where I actually got upset about it, because that's when I realised, like, oh, he's gone.
Yeah.
Whereas with just when I watched it, I had the recent memory of series 6 in my mind where he did nothing. Yeah. But then, because I felt like I'd used up all my emotion on him when we thought he'd died towards the beginning, which was silly.
Yeah. All in all, I think we are seeing some actual quality episodes of The Walking Dead make a return. I've gone on record to say I wasn't a big fan of the season premiere, the 100th episode, and like we said, 2 and 3 really weren't that great because we can barely remember them. But I think 4 is signs of a bit of a return to form, like they were saying. Like, there was some great character moments, there was some well done action, and it actually incorporated what I love most about the show, the walkers themselves. They were back in it, they were a threat, same as the people. And I think especially next week's episode, where it promises to be Gabriel and Negan and something of like their relationship being shown on screen, it will be brilliant to see how these episodes go forward now that we have seen there is quality to come back to the show.
Yeah, this episode was sort of a reminder, like, oh, this is a zombie show. This isn't just shooting at walls and shooting at cars, because you're in an apocalypse, you're trying to save your ammunition, you're not just wasting it.
So that's it for this week. We'll be back next week to discuss the future episodes, where we'll be returning to
The Jeffrey Dean Morgan Show. Now on to our primary review of this week. It's Marvel's latest and greatest, Thor Ragnarok. This is the 17th film based in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and is the 17th Marvel Studios film to open number 1 on its given weekend with box office numbers, which just shows how powerful Marvel is and how popular it is. But Zach, what did you think of Taika Waititi's Thor Ragnarok?
I really, really enjoyed this movie. I think it's a definite top 10 for the MCU as a whole. We're coming up to 10 years of the MCU now. It's going to be next year that it's going to be the 10-year anniversary of Iron Man. And throughout the whole run of the MCU, we've been seeing films where they're half and half. It's half and half superhero film. It's half and half a spy espionage. Half and half superhero film. It's half and half a heist film. This was the first film, though, where I think it felt like a straight-up comedy with a little bit of superhero on the side. I thought this was a really, really great movie, and was one of arguably Taika Waititi's best films to yet be made.
Some bold claims there, boys. Some bold claims.
One of.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this film. Like, people talk about the superhero bubble and how it's going to burst at some point, and they talk about the superhero films that stand above the rest, and they're the ones that aren't just superhero films, but they are other ones in themselves, like The Dark Knight's a crime thriller, Logan's a western, and this one, I'm not sure if comedy's going to stand out as the rest, because a lot of the Marvel films are funny, but this is definitely up there with Guardians. The debate could be had between the two on which are the funnier ones, whereas this one you can tell it's a lot more improvisational, whereas with Guardians you can tell that James Gunn's just a genius.
Yeah. I think this is the best character movie for all of the Marvel films. Like, don't get me wrong, James Gunn does amazing with the Guardians, but Taika Waititi set out with the bold task of trying to make Thor the most interesting Marvel character. A hard task after you've seen the likes of Thor: The Dark World. And yet, with this movie, he made Thor one of the most interesting characters in the world. We see him go through, struggles in this movie. He loses family members, he loses his hammer, which we all know, not a spoiler as such. He, loses his friends. He loses all sense of who he is, and then he has to, battle with friends. He goes through so much in this movie and still remains an excellent character who is just so developed that he can now rival the likes of, Hemsworth. No, what am I saying? Hemsworth. He can now rival the likes of Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. for prime billing, in screen time, because he's that interesting a character now. He's so funny in this movie and so well thought out and developed. I was now more willing to watch him than I was the likes of Tom Hiddleston, who has been the best part of every Thor movie so far.
Yeah, this is definitely the best of the Thor franchise, hands down, no question about it. But would you say it's the best, not ensemble film, but what would you say is the best Marvel solo film?
For me personally, the best Marvel solo film is the original Iron Man, but I think this is now a close contender. It dives so well into the character of Thor, shakes up the mythos, and yet still retains some of the classic features in such a beautifully balanced way that it just makes this movie really unique and stupidly fresh to be able to watch.
It's just fun. Like Taika Waititi said, you watch all these films and they're just slow and they're depressing, and he said, well, they're good and they definitely have their place. He said he remembers going to the cinema when he was younger and just having fun and coming out smiling. And he said that's the sort of films that he wants to make, and he's definitely achieved that with this. Because it is just the sort of film where you want to get your mates around, you want to watch it and you want to have a laugh.
Yeah, I think he's also succeeded in the sense that he's made, quite frankly, one of the most independent Marvel movies there yet is. While the argument can be made that you do need to have seen certain Marvel movies to understand some of the parts of this, realistically, this is, for me, one of those Marvel films where you can just go in and enjoy it. This is the third Thor film, and yet, realistically, I would not have a problem if this was the first. If you know the guy, he's a lightning guy, he's got a hammer, he's got a bit of an asshole brother, you can go in this movie and really, really enjoy it. They re-establish the mythos, they get you to know the character, and then they shake it up in such a way so that new people can come into it and really enjoy it. That may be a little bit questionable when you think about the Hulk character, but certainly when it comes to the character of Thor, this is a great introduction to the character if people have seen him in previous films and have been disappointed by him.
I'd say with just the visual direction and the visual aesthetic of this film, the CGI looks great.
Yeah, definitely.
Which it would when you spend hundreds of millions on the budget. But I'm not sure if... Do you reckon Taika directed the action himself, or he got someone else to do it and he was just there for the improv of the comedy?
I'd like to think that he did it for himself. You obviously have, people come in and, choreograph this stuff. But no, I like to think that he was very on the ground for this kind of stuff. He was involved in a lot of it, because it is very similar to James Gunn in the sense of this is his movie. You can see his fingerprints all over it, with certain actors that he uses that we'll get onto in a moment, and certain how it's scripted, how the comedy is played out. So I think he would have tried to make as much of an effort to get as involved in this as he could. I think it would have been something that he would have directed, and it would have been a new challenge for him to try to take, and he clearly did well.
This has one of the best action sequences in probably the MCU. It's the opening scene, and it has a shot that I've wanted in a Thor film for ages. It's just following the hammer, Mjolnir, as it's going through all these people, and it's just... I'm so happy that they finally brought it to screen.
Yeah, it was a beautiful swan song for Mjolnir. I thought it was so well done, and they made that an inanimate object comedic. They made it pretty much a character, and the character Korg says it. Losing the hammer was equivalent to losing a loved one, and it really was in this movie. They gave it that beautiful shot, and they made it really great, and then you miss the hammer as soon as it's gone. Kenneth Branagh actually said in the original Thor movie, Mjolnir Mjolnir? That sounds really, really hard to pronounce. Can we just change the name? And both Zach Penn and Stan Lee firmly told him no. And then in the For the Dark World movie, they decided to have Kat Dennings' character mispronounce the name every single time, just so they can make reference to that, because it is a stupidly annoying name. Put some vowels in it, please.
I always thought that until I learned how to pronounce it, and now I'm just pleased that I know how to say Mjolnir.
Yeah.
What would you say about the Doctor Strange cameo? Would you say that was forced, or did you like it?
I really, really liked it, because what I was worried about going into this film was that this is going to be the start of the Marvel duo team-up movies, where we're going to see characters start coming into them, and it's going to be a script that is devised solely to bring characters together, which this movie wasn't when it had Hulk. And that was what I was worried it was also going to be when we had Doctor Strange coming in. I was thinking, oh god, it's just going to be someone to give exposition. But he really wasn't. He played a really comedic role, and when he left, when we didn't need to see the character anymore, he served his story function. He wasn't seen again, he wasn't mentioned again, which is, I think, something that the MCU as a whole needs to try to reach. Like, if they should be able to bring in characters like this, because they've got this bigger universe, they should be able to bring them in to provide little story functions and then go away. And I thought he was really well used in this movie. Like, we know he had to be there to give that exposition, but I thought he played a really comedic role, and the scene where he's teleporting Thor around was, for me, one of the funniest scenes in the film, especially when you look at his treatment of Loki as well.
I've been falling for 30 minutes!
My favourite moment of it all was just when he says, "Listen here, you second-rate sorcerer," and then just Strange just banishes him. It was absolutely hilarious.
I'd say that something that the MCU has done really well with is costumes, but Doctor Strange's costume seemed, while it was very much comic accurate, it seemed sort of off a bit to me, because his gloves look like oven mittens, and whereas they've usually done a good job with, Thor's costume, for example, they've updated what could just be a cheesy 80s costume and they've made it look cool. But here I'm not really sure what happened, because it is slightly different to the one that we saw in the Doctor Strange film. But I don't know, that's just tiny nitpick.
Yeah, the bigger nitpick for me is the fact that he's now wearing the Eye of Agamotto after the character had said to him, oh, it will require further years of mastery and training, and it appears 3 weeks later he's now wearing the eye and has mastered the use of an Infinity Stones. That was something that just annoyed me.
I have a little theory and prediction corner for Infinity War. I feel that Thanos is going to kill someone as big as Iron Man, or he's going to kill the foreshadowing they had in Age of Ultron, where the whole team's just lying there. Then I feel that Doctor Strange is just going to come in and then he's going to use the Eye of Agamotto and then reverse it, and then they're going to kill a second. Then they're going to kill Falcon or something.
Oh god, I hope Falcon goes. I despise that character, but I think that would be something really hilarious to see in Infinity War. I think we'll now have to dive into a little bit of spoilers, because we are going to have to discuss where we think this movie is going to lead the future of the MCU. And I think it's going to certainly lead it into a promising place, because, this is luckily a Marvel film where there isn't a lot of universe building, there isn't a lot of sequel baiting, but there were two very distinct scenes. There's, the scene where Loki gets his eyes on the Tesseract, he sees it after the events of the Avengers, and he, sees it and thinks, ah. And then also where Thanos comes in at the end, and I think these are two really interesting scenes.
With the bit where Loki sees the Tesseract, do you reckon before Asgard explodes, he puts it in his pocket?
Yeah, I would not be surprised if he had done that, and I think there'll be a scene within Infinity War where Thanos sees that, and that will be the first of the Infinity Stones that he collects.
I also feel that in Infinity War, it's going to be a big emotional thing where he gets the Mind Stone from Vision, then Vision just dies, and it's no!
I think they'll do a Deus Ex Machina with
a Jerry Ex Machina.
A Jerry Ex Machina, I apologise. I think they'll do one of those with Vision, he'll die, but they'll bring him back, because there is a lot of fan love for Vision. People have come in.
I like his fashion.
Yeah, I love Vision. He's my favourite Avenger. I think there's room for him to come back in these future ones. So I would like to maybe see him be saved.
Something that I also love about this film is it fixes one of the biggest plot holes in the MCU, and that's not the Spider-Man Homecoming 6 years later. It's the
It's the left-handed infinity.
Yeah. And how Hela just comes in and goes, fake. And I was like, that's such a small detail.
Moment, yeah.
But I was so thankful that it was included because it's been something that's annoyed me for years.
It's a real testament to Kevin Feige's attention to detail throughout his masterful universe, like how, while he doesn't tell the directors to put certain, like, massive plot elements, he does just tell them to put in the tiny little bits, and it just shows how much the people at Marvel are paying attention to what the people say.
Although they are releasing a big, like, fold-out sheet saying exactly when everything's based in the continuity because of the Spider-Man Homecoming title card that literally just ruined it all. So now Kevin Feige's just having to go back and sort it all out.
They just dug themselves a hole there. They could have just said, some years later, and then you wouldn't have this whole debacle. Why did you precisely have to say 8 years later? It's just like, why dig yourself that hole? You've gotten this far on ambiguity. Keep going, you know it works. It's like, what happened to Abomination? We don't care. Just keep going.
Tim Roth he deserves more.
He does.
But this film is colourful, and there's been loads of video essays on how Marvel films look sort of ugly because they don't have the colour saturation, so the colour doesn't pop out of the screen. Whereas in this one, you can tell that it does, especially with, what's it called, like the Devil's Anus or something like that?
Yeah, that was hilarious. Yeah, it looked absolutely brilliant. Like, and it wasn't just on a CGI level. I thought it was like on a practical and costume level as well. Yeah. Like, everyone in this movie is very vibrant and colourful, especially like when you look at characters like the Grandmaster. Like, even just some of the sets, like when they were...
It's my birthday.
Just stop. Like, even when you just looked at some of the sets in like the junkyard that he landed on, like, it was also colourful. And when like they go into the parade and they've got the Hulk parade, everyone loves the Hulk, and it's just really well made.
I thought there were two really obvious and dodgy CGI shots that I noticed. One, Hela's mask.
Oh god, yeah, there were moments
was obvious
where
in a couple of
it was
times.
like, oh no.
And also you can tell that they had a last-minute location change, because even in the first trailer, when they show Mjolnir...
Being destroyed.
Rip Mjolnir. It was in a city, and then they had Odin as a homeless man living on the streets, whereas they changed it, so now you can tell Anthony Hopkins does not want to be there.
Oh, good grief, yeah. He's become very much, give me my paycheck and I'll read whatever it is you want to say. Like, he did that with Transformers. He doesn't know what was going on in this movie.
You could tell he was having fun as Loki.
Oh, yeah, that
he was like, oh shit.
Oh shit, that was my favourite. That was just so good.
I loved how inventive it was, where Thor threw Mjolnir, and then he had his hand behind Odin's, Loki's head. Like, then he was like, I'm calling it back.
That was a great scene. I was like, fuck. Because me, having total disregard for Thor the Dark World, not being able to remember a single character's name from it, I don't even know what the elf was called.
The Dark World was so forgettable. After Zach and I saw this, Zach was like,
I completely
where was Thor's mum? And I was like, she died in the Dark World. Oh.
For the Dark World was so forgettable that I literally, the first time I saw Odin in this movie, it took me about a good 5 minutes to register that, oh crap, yeah, it was Loki. It wasn't actually Odin. Like, I thought, like, Odin's just having a bit of a Sunday stroll and a bit of a sit down. And then I realised, oh, actually, shit, no, that's actually Loki.
I'd say this definitely does have the MCU problem of a weak villain. Like, it didn't need her to bring in this big backstory and this big everything. It could have easily just been something else. And also, like, the zombie army, that could have...
Yeah, it's another faceless CGI army. That pissed me off.
What would have made that better was if she said to the Asgardians, like, will you fight with me? And then, like, handful of them said yeah. And then they were the ones that they fought. Like, say, even just instead of killing Thor's friends...
Which I loved, because I hate those characters.
But instead of killing Thor's friends... If instead they joined Hela and then Thor had to fight them, I thought that would have been an interesting character development for them, rather than just being, oh no, we're now dead. I don't know, it does just fall under the, oh, look at me, I'm the worst person to have, oh no, I'm dead.
Yeah. I think now that we've reached that point, we are going to go into character. Like, we'll go character by character. And we will be discussing the star of the movie, Korg. But first, Let's start with, I think, who was the standout character of this movie, and that was Valkyrie. I thought she was really
Loved
great.
her.
Tessa Thompson was brilliant in this, and it makes me desperate to see her in more. Like,
She was great in Westworld, but she was even better in this because you can just tell how much fun everyone's having on set.
oh yeah. I was like curious as to what she was going to be like as a character. I was thinking it was going to be it's the love interest character. She was just going to be a new version of Lady Sif because she wasn't present in this movie for some reason. I thought that was what it was going to be, but I was then pleasantly surprised to see like how brilliant a character she was. She was honestly one of the film's funniest characters. The relationship she had with the Hulk was really great.
I know you from somewhere.
Yeah, I know you from somewhere. And then to see her like beating the crap out of Chris Hemsworth was a very pleasant sight because that just like made me think, yeah, he's not a god.
Puny god. Now you know what it feels like.
Yeah, that was another brilliant scene. I think Tom Hiddleston as well as Loki in this film, while I think he had nothing to do, he was just kind of there because they needed Loki. He was one of the film's funniest parts. Like, he had some really great lines, like when he returns to save the day, it's like, your saviour has arrived! And although Matt Damon maybe could have done a better job as him, as this film quite clearly proved, I do think Tom Hiddleston was great in it.
I loved the whole meta thing of the theatre being like the first Thor being, well, it was the Dark World scene, but the first two Thors being played out in theatre and how it had the Hemsworth brother from Westworld as Thor and how it had Sam Neill and it.
Yeah, absolutely hilarious. And then you've got the social worker from Hunt for the Wilder People, and this is the Grandmaster's assistant. Was just
She's the first character. I can't remember the publishing thing, but Marvel a while ago bought a small comic company, and she's the first character to be brought into the MCU that's from that company and not an official Marvel character.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a nice little bit of
I can't
trivia.
remember her name, but
You'll get it. You'll get it.
Nice little nod for you there.
Let's discuss Jeff Goldblum, though.
Loved him. Jeff Goldblum as Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, he was literally the personification of what people on the internet think he's like in real life, when he clearly isn't.
In interviews, there was a Facebook Live one with Ali Plum, who does the Radio 1 reviews, and it was him and Taika Waititi, and Ali Plum kept trying to ask him questions, and Jeff Goldblum was just going off on tangents, like, oh no, and then he'd go completely off on one, and then Taika's there trying to be a genuinely nice dude, he's like trying to join in with Goldblum's jokes, but then he's trying to answer the questions at the same time.
I don't care, I could listen to like Jeff Goldblum just talk about things just for 60 hours. That is just the most amazing human being on the planet. He's like in his 60s and he looks great for his age.
I'd say this is probably one of the first films where, like Marvel films, where they've had the director go on the press tour as well because of how much of a personality Taika is and how great he is. And this film almost allows me to forgive him for Green Lantern.
We do not mention Green Lantern. I was on a real high, man. we were discussing a good movie. We were having some fun talking about Taika Waititi, and then what do? You go and throw in Green Lantern. I'm not going to say I'm disappointed. I'm not going to say I'm angry. I'm ashamed. Think about what you've done today.
But also, Taika Waititi is really great as Korg.
Korg was the best character in the whole damn movie.
Oh, I've just been carrying around because I felt guilty. I stepped on him on the bridge. Oh, Mick's dead.
Yeah, it looks like the foundations are still there. If you give it some time, maybe... Oh, no, the foundations are gone. I've been starting a bit of a revolution. I've been handing out some posters and having some meetings, but only my mum and his boyfriend have been coming round to the meetings. I don't get very well with my mum's boyfriend.
Here, I'm going to add a tragic backstory to Korg. Right, so you know in the Dark World where Thor completely obliterates the dude made of rock, I reckon that was Korg's actual father.
No!
And then the reason why he doesn't get on with his mum's boyfriend is because she's not half the man that his dad was.
No, that's so sad. No, rock character from For the Dark World.
No need to be scared of him, unless you're made of scissors.
Oh, that's amazing. Just a little rock, paper, scissors joke there.
Rock, paper, scissors joke for you.
I think it's very vain when directors put themselves in movies.
And Night Shyamalan, Peter Jackson.
But when it's done like this, it's absolutely hilarious.
Like, if you didn't know... If you didn't specifically know who Taika Waititi was, you would have no clue that he was the director.
Yeah. Like, I saw this with my girlfriend, and she was just, like, so confused as to who it was. She's like, I know know I've heard that voice somewhere before. It's like, I refuse
Green
to tell
Lantern.
her. Yeah, I just refused to tell her because I wanted her just to be able to enjoy the surprise at the end of, oh my god, it's the director. He's that cool a guy that he can just come into something like this and just play a little one-off hilarious character.
Taika's really sort of made his mark in the Marvel films. Like, I would be happy if Thor gets through Infinity War, which I expect he probably will, if for Thor 4, instead of it being called Thor 4 something or another, if it was just Ragnarok 2.
Yeah.
Like, and then they had this trilogy and then they just had the other two and sort of pushed them aside a bit. Because if they brought Taika back, and then it would just sort of all slot into place.
Yeah, and I think everyone had so much fun in this movie, there'd be no complaint. Like, this was a really stupidly well-received movie, like, financially and critically.
It's the highest scoring on Rotten Tomatoes MCU film.
Damn, surprised it beat Homecoming, but, like, because everyone in the world loved Homecoming, but to see, like, it do so well, I think it's a clear sign that Kevin Feige bringing in these, like, offshot directors like Ryan Coogler and Taika Waititi, like bringing them in to then like make these movies is like a brilliant sign of how well that's working.
And it also shows that the MCU is going in a better direction, because Edgar Wright was famously doing Ant-Man before he then had to leave the project due to creative differences. And all these franchise films have had so many directors leave, Phil Lord, Chris Miller and Solo. But this shows that they are putting trust in them, because Taika Waititi said that he had little to no studio interference because he pitched them the film that he wanted to make. Yeah. And then it was in line with what the studio wanted, and they were like, just make that, just exactly make that.
I think also this movie like marks the start of what I think all superhero movies are going to start to become. If you start to look at the likes of Warner Brothers and Fox, they're dumbing down on the big universe films. And if you think about with the Marvel universe as well, after Infinity War, they're going to start dumbing it down. And I think what we're going to see on all of these fronts are these individual little superhero movies, because that's what Thor Ragnarok is. Like, although it does service a larger story, it's a brilliant little episode or chapter that works by itself. And I think that's what audiences are responding so well to. Something that just works, where you don't have to have seen, like, episode 52, 96 and 84 just to understand it. And to see more movies like that work well is going to be brilliant, because I think they're what this genre does best, when it's a superhero movie but it brings in other elements like comedy, like it's a heist movie, like it's a mystery film. And I think if we can see films like Thor Ragnarok that does this so well, do really well, like at the box office and with critics, we'll hopefully start to see more on every front, which is clearly what we're starting to see when, like, you're getting things like New Mutants, and James Franco's going to do a multiple man movie or whatever. And I really hope that, like, with DC as well, like, we start, after Flashpoint happens, we get these individual stories, like with Batgirl and hopefully a Nightwing. And I think Thor Ragnarok will, in time to come, be kind of marked as one of the maybe movies that helps start that trend. Because that's one of the reasons why this movie is so good. Because it is just such a well done, tightly knitted together story that just works, and you don't have to have seen anything while going in.
Also, Marvel announced a while ago that this is the start of a Hulk storyline that's going to be continued. Do you think Bruce Banner's dead? Because do you reckon that's the storyline that they're going to take it on? Because Bruce said after that amazing shot where it had, like, the reflection of the Hulk and then Bruce, and then it showed how they're the same. But do you reckon, because he said the next time Hulk comes out, he doesn't think that he's going to be able to get out of it again. So do you reckon that's what they were going for in, like, the direction they're taking this Hulk story? Yeah,
I think that's something that will be hopefully explored when, like, we see Infinity War and whatever following films the Hulk happens to appear in. And because I think it will be very interesting for the character and for the moviegoers itself. Like, the moviegoers, like, as great as Mark Ruffalo is, they want to see the Hulk. Like, you don't go to a Hulk movie to see Mark Ruffalo, you go to see the Hulk kicking the shit out of things.
Say that to Edward Norton.
Yeah, exactly. But to see, like, still Mark Ruffalo have a purpose for being there, to, like, see that kind of, like, mental confliction, even if they just set an entire movie where the Hulk is the Hulk for the whole film, but Mark Ruffalo, the Bruce Banner, is in his head,
like Nightmare in Silver.
Yeah, exactly. Like if he's in his head, that would be a really interesting movie kind of put forward, because I think the most interesting thing about the Hulk is like Banner's fear of becoming him. Like he knows it's right to sometimes do it, but at the end of the day, he is always terrified to become Witch. And to see like a sort of trend where he cannot go back to being Bruce Banner would be like really interesting for his character, because like they make a joke about it in this film. He's like, I've got 7 PhDs. Like he prides himself in ways on being Bruce Banner. Like,
and it's almost like he's trying to make excuses to himself on why he should be Bruce Banner, because he's like, I have 7 PhDs, I am smart and I am clever.
Yeah. I've got Scarlett Johansson fancying me. It's like,
Lucky sod.
You've got reasons to stay human, mate. You've got reasons to stay human.
2 things that annoyed me about the Big Wolf. Well, not about the Big Wolf, but about things that included the Big Wolf. Idris Elba is supposed to be this dude that can see everything.
Yep.
He's running all the Asgardians across the bridge. How did he not see that the wolf was, like, guarding the Bifrost to begin with?
We're going to get into this, because I was really disappointed by how much Idris Elba was in this. Like, yeah,
I wanted him to be in it more.
Yeah, he had his really, really badass shots, but I was really expecting him to be in this more. I was hoping it was going to be him that took the fight to Hela. It was that stupid little side character from Dark World I can't remember the name of. And I was thinking this was going to be the movie that finally confirmed Heimdall is the person with the Soul Stone. Like it's in him or in the sword or something. Nothing was done to that, which while can be argued to be a good thing, it kind of does just bastardise Heimdall, because it gives him really nothing to do in the movie.
Also, another thing that annoyed me about the wolf, when Banner jumped out of the ship, I was really hoping, because it's happened so many times, where he lands and then he's not the Hulk, and he just like flops like it happened in the Incredible Hulk, and it's happened so many times. I hoped that they'd just finally have him land as the Hulk and it'd be this big badass shot, but then it does go for the joke, and it thinks that it's the first film and the first people to have ever done that, and it's like, oh yeah, look at us, we're funny, we're new, we're edgy. Whereas I thought that it would have been really badass if it just landed as the Hulk.
Yeah, I wanted this to be the film that delivered the promise of Fan 4 Stick, where when we had the original trailer, the Thing was jumping out of the plane and was gonna land like as the Thing. And while we never got that shot in the movie because it was an atrocity, it would have been amazing to see something like that as the Hulk. And I think he was really kind of downplayed in this movie as like an action character. For me, he was a lot more of a comedy character. Don't get me wrong, he was hilarious in the moments where it's like when he's completely naked, and like when he just throws the bed at Valkyrie just to get her attention. I do think like his capacity as an action character was kind of like limited, because like when we look back to the original Avengers, he's got the best scenes in that battle, like where he just like punches it when he says like, "Oh, I'm always angry," and it was kind of just lost in this movie a little bit.
And also, people are being like, "Oh, Thor and Hulk are having a fight," and while it is a brilliant fight, it happened in the Avengers.
Yeah, we've already had one, and I think really we've had a bit of a superior one as well. Like, I think the fight was a tiny bit of a disappointment in this movie. I was hoping to maybe see like, I think Thor became far too powerful far too quickly. I think Hulk should have really had his moment in the sun to like really kick the crap out of him, and then there'd be that thing where he can bring out the lightning, because he is a very puny man compared to the size of that thing.
I think it's the sort of thing like Batman vs Superman, where it's still a really well done fight. It's just people were expecting this big, massive thing.
Yeah.
And
especially like given that they made it the core part of the marketing, it's going to be that fight.
Like amazing imagine how well it would have been if we had no clue Hulk was in this.
Yeah.
And then the crowd start doing the green, and then it's all like, what's...
It's like,
and it's like, oh my goodness.
It's like, oh, they went there.
I loved how Valkyrie was just watching it, and then as he goes up, and then cuts to Korg, it's like, another day, another dunk.
Yeah. It's just a real testament to the comedy and capability of this movie.
Although the flash forward when Thor was in Age of Ultron and he was in that pool, and it's like, you killed us and it's stuff.
Yeah, they had clearly very different ideas for what they wanted to do with this movie, and I think when like people are doing their marathons, that's going to be something that people are like, what?
It also shows how much was improvised. It's almost like Aladdin, Disney wanted the script to be nominated for an Oscar, so they put it forward. But then they said that Robin Williams improvised so much of it that it can't be eligible for the script Oscar. So,
which is understandable. And while it can be a problem in Marvel movies, I mean, look at Iron Man 2. Like, honestly, that is... What was Sam Rockwell doing in that movie, honestly?
He's better than that.
He was dreadful in that movie because of it, and it made me dislike him for a long while.
Until you watch Moon.
Yeah, until you watch Moon. But it made me very, very wary about there being too much improvisation in these movies. And to see it done so perfectly in this movie, it's like a real, like, good sign that, like, the Marvel franchise is in a good place at this moment with things like that. Where do we think this film's going to go, though? Like, there are so many ways it can go. Like, I don't think Hela's dead. She's clearly going to be back for Infinity War.
You can't kill death.
No, you really can't. And while Cate Blanchett isn't the biggest star on the planet, she does at least deserve more
than 10 minutes.
Yeah, a death scene. If we're going to show, like, her death scene, it's got to be a big one. It's got to be something meaningful. And then just to see her somewhat approaching the big flame guy with a giant sword bursting out the ground, that's not a good conclusion for her character or for the actress. So I think we'll definitely see her again. And then, of course, how we've got Thanos coming in at the end. Like, I think that's going to...
Do you reckon they're going to completely explode Asgard's ship? Or Thor's going to come out and then he's going to... No, and then that ship's going to get away? Or they're going to completely kill all the Asgardians?
I think they're going to kill the Asgardians, and that's going to be a primary, like, focus for Thor, why he wants to then... fight Thanos, and then how he brings the Guardians to the Avengers.
That means they're going to kill Korg.
Yeah, I think they probably will do something like that to really make you hate Thanos. They're going to need to do something very quickly to make you dislike the character, because they're going to want everyone primed to fight him. And I think it'll be the scene where probably they reveal Heimdall is the Soul Stone, or like has it in him somehow. They'll kill Heimdall, which will make you hate him. And then I think Loki... I don't think they'll kill him off, but he'll probably spend a good majority of the movie as like a prisoner or an underling of...
Yeah, because Thanos will be like, you failed me, get on Earth, and now you'll be whatever.
Watch me take everything. And then I think it's going to be that conflict that then, because the rumour is that in the trailer...
Yeah, he hits the Guardian's windshield.
And like that's what then he like brings them to Earth, and that's what makes them go together. I think that's what's going to be the tension, like the animosity between the pair.
An extra thing that I'd like to add about this film, I feel like this film the Stan Lee cameo had the biggest impact on the film, like with the haircut, because the haircut for Thor is a big thing.
Yeah, then... I prefer him with the long hair, but that was a really great scene where like they cut his hair. And like he actually had a story function, like most days like he's just a cutaway joke, but in this movie he actually was doing something, like somewhat served a story function.
I'd say my favourite Stan Lee cameo apart from Guardians 2 is in Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer, where he's trying to get into their wedding, and he's like, "No, I'm Stan Lee. No, I'm Stan Lee."
It's really, really upsetting that you claim that's your favourite Stan Lee cameo, not "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Sunshine!" is the DJ in the strip club. That's the best Stan Lee cameo.
You may not be able to find love here, but you can rent it for 5 minutes.
Oh, God. I think the future for this franchise is in a really bright place, though. Like, I think Thor has been so drastically changed in this movie. Like, spoiler alert, like, the shot in the trailer where he's got the lightning powers.
They lied to me.
That's not true. Like, he's got an eye patch. Like, he loses an eye in this movie.
In the Infinity War trailer they showed at Comic-Con, they also had him with an eye, so it didn't spoil that he lost it.
And it's like, he's gone through so much in this movie. He's going to be such a force to be reckoned with in the future movies. Like, especially when he gets his new hammer, because they've confirmed in casting wise that Peter Dinklage will be in Infinity War.
Yes.
And there's big rumours, which I can't wait for because he's an amazing actor, that he will be playing the Dwarf King, which is like one of the 9 realms, and he will build for the new like Mjolnir, like with the axe on the end.
I love the axe.
And I think that's going to be brilliant to then see like where he's in full lightning god mode and he's got his new hammer and he's literally become Goku.
Do you have anything else you want to say on Thor? I would say Marvel has enough money, so you don't need to go out and see this now. It's not like Mother. I would say it is still definitely worth a watch. You'll have a lot of fun watching it. You'll have a lot of fun just seeing it, because Taika Waititi knows how to make a funny film.
Yeah, this is definitely, for me, a top 10 Marvel movie. It was brilliantly well directed. Some of the comedy was a little bit hit or miss, but it will entertain audiences, both adult and children.
Yeah.
It was really, really well made, and I think it's a testament to how well Kevin Feige knows these directors and knows the right one to pick for these characters, and how much they can shake up a character when they want to. So while maybe don't rush out immediately, go and see it, definitely keep this film on your radar, because I think when this whole superhero buzz is finished, and when the whole first Marvel universe is done, we're going to look back in years and we're going to think Ragnarok was a real highlight and was one of those just individual little movies that could do something great.
I also can't wait for the Blu-ray release, because just think of how many takes were improvised with like different alternate jokes. The amount of content.
Yeah, there's going to be so much on the bonus materials. I can't wait for that. So yeah, Thor Ragnarok, really, really great movie. We rate it honestly stupidly highly. For me, it's probably getting into the top 5 of the MCU movies. It's not the best, but it is definitely up there.
I rate it 7 meeks out of Korg.
So, now we're going to move on to the Quickfire Question, and it's my turn this week. Now, we've been discussing Taika Waititi quite a bit with the Thor Ragnarok review, and he's a well-known indie director, and it's been interesting to see him come into a big studio project that is a superhero movie. And it got me thinking while we were discussing this, there aren't many indie superhero films. And while like the big studios have got the big characters like the Batmans, the Iron Man, Spider-Man, my question would be, what superhero movie would be better if it was reimagined as an indie movie? My answer for this is Zack Snyder's 2013 Man of Steel. This is one of my absolute favourite superhero films ever made. I really enjoy it for all the problems it's got, I admit. I think it's well shot, I think it's well acted. But I think with an indie movie, you could do something really special here. What I would do is I would remove everything that is shown after he gets the suit. I would have the ending of this movie literally be him getting the suit and then flying off. I would make this movie primarily a story about a young boy accepting his powers, because that's what I loved so much about Man of Steel. You've got the scenes where like he's struggling with the X-ray vision. That would be amazing to show if you got a young child actor who brought them in to show that kind of peril. It'd be great to then see the mother-son relationship. I think it'd be great if you had the scene with the school bus where he's like trying to save it and he doesn't know whether to. And then where his father, Kevin Costner, comes in and says like, oh, what should I have done? Like, just let him die? He says, maybe you should have. I think that would be a really interesting narrative to be seen on screen. And also I would include maybe like a teenage storyline where you've got something where it's like he's disobeying his father, and then that leads into the death of Kevin Costner. You wouldn't need to include the Kryptonian matters in this because people know the story. And I think it'd be fascinating to see something different like this, because while I love Man of Steel, even I can admit it was by the numbers, the story of Superman. So to see like this intimate part explored so acutely and tightly would be really interesting, because Smallville failed at it spectacularly.
So you'd want Midnight Special mixed with Smallville?
In ways, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd basically just like to see Superman done right, because what's interesting about Superman isn't he's got all these powers, he's got the cool suit, he goes off and fights all these villains. It's just the fact that he's an ordinary guy who just decides to do good when the world is crap. And that would be something that would be beautiful to be shown in this movie. Someone who goes through life thinking, I could rule the world, but really I should just try and be an ordinary guy and just do what's right here and there. And I think that's something that, like all indie movies or shorts do, they show a message, they show an exploration of a human mind, and that's what I think an indie version of Man of Steel could do.
I would like to see an indie version of Spider-Man Homecoming. Because it's the classic affair of it being taken out to large proportions with large stakes with, well, it's not world-ending stakes, but it's still a big fight sequence. I would just like a smaller, on-the-ground story, which is similar to what we got, but even then you can still tell that it's a big production. If it was more like chronicle, an interesting take on found footage, where Peter has a project for school or something like that, so he's carrying a camera around with him, and then we see all through the film all these spectacular things happening to him because he's Spider-Man and he's filmed it all himself for this school project. But then as the credits are rolling next to it, it shows the cut that he had to edit out Spider-Man. So then it's literally just like a 5-minute thing on like, oh, what was your summer like, or something like that. Yeah. And it was like a 5-minute thing where it doesn't look like a lot's happened, but we've seen all this happen. And I think that could be quite interesting because it could deal with themes of growing up like Spider-Man does in the regular films, but it would give an intimacy that isn't normally explored in blockbusters, because indie level, as you said, they have a meaning, they have more of a message. It's not about the spectacle as such, and it's more about characters in the story. And I feel that a found footage Spider-Man film could work effectively, because if there is an action sequence in there, just imagine if they did it properly and executed it in a way that worked. So for example, the cameras, he sets up the camera somewhere, it's poking out his bag, but then his bag falls off and it's falling down, and then he grabs the camera with his web and then it swings round, and then it shows like the whole action in like a big panoramic shot.
I'm not gonna lie.
That sort of thing. So I'm saying that a version of Spider-Man Homecoming, or the original Spider-Man, the origin story without the Uncle Ben stuff, would be an interesting indie film.
I'm not gonna lie, that sounds like a great pitch. I'd love to see something like that done, and I think some of the ideas there, especially like with the kind of shots you'd make, would be very interesting. My only problems with it that I see are the fact that you claim it's kind of like a coming-of-age film. We've got a lot of those already. Yeah. We've got a hell of a lot of those. And given the fact that it is the Marvel franchise, I don't think you could make something on an indie scale when it is Marvel. It is the blockbuster king at the moment. And I think mine essentially stands apart because it kind of gives an interesting exploration into the condition of a superhero. Like, they don't do things because... That's what makes Superman unique. He doesn't do this because his parents were murdered. He doesn't do it because he was bitten by a radioactive spider. He just does it because he knows it's right. He knows that it's what people should do, and it's his job to do it. That's why I think it would be interesting to explore that kind of mentality. Because how does a person live in this world, as dreadful as it is, like with politics and war, and still, at the end of the day, think, I should be doing this? Which I think is something that isn't shown, whereas I think with your Homecoming, as much as I'd love to see something like it, I think we would get themes that we've seen in other movies.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of how it could then be an interesting take on it. Yeah. And because coming of age is a very common thing, if they did make it more grounded, I'm not sure. Yeah. But
so we're gonna have to toss the coin, or are you gonna concede?
No, because I'd like to see both these films, and you make the argument. You make the argument that Disney's a powerhouse and it would never make an indie film. That's true, but then would Warner Bros? They wouldn't take Superman and put that into an indie film because he is a big staple.
Well, you've got that argument to make, but I think if this was being made in 2013, like as you say, it's reimagined, released when it was. If you think you've just had the big colossal disaster that is Green Lantern, lots of people didn't enjoy that because it was very by the numbers and badly done. You've just had the sensational Dark Knight trilogy, which are 3 of the best blockbusters you'll ever see. Mm-hmm. So maybe Warner Brothers thinks, let's try and do something different this time, because we now know that we haven't got the Dark Knight hype. We've seen that these ones don't work. Let's try something different for a character. Let this then be the stepping stone that shows the world that they're trying something different, and that they're allowing for creativity with new types of actors, where then people who are interested in replicating the same kind of creativity and doing something different are then able to be brought in to work in the DCU, which is actually what we're seeing, where we're getting like experimental and different kinds of filmmakers coming forward to making these movies, because like you've got Joss Whedon doing Batgirl and Matt Reeves doing Batman. I think that would be the kind of indie movie that would then set up something so much larger. You've got a small beginning of a little boy learning he's got superpowers that will then lead to a universe of heroes coming from it.
I wish that's the Man of Steel that we got.
I like it. I like Man of Steel, but I think
I enjoy Man of
Steel,
Steel, but that would be 10 times better.
Yeah.
Especially with if they just had Zack Snyder as director of photography.
Yeah. Give it to someone else and just end the movie with him launching into the sky. That's all you need. So, heads or tails?
Heads. That wasn't a flip. Duh.
It's literally the theme from Jaws. Yes! Yes!
Damn.
Yes! I was so proud of that pitch. Thank you, God. That is now, what is it? 3-2? Because you've got 3. I think I've got 2 now. Or have I just overtaken you?
You definitely haven't overtaken
Damn!
me.
I'm hoping I convinced you.
I'll have to go back and look at C. I think it might be 3-3.
Oh, I'm not complaining about that.
But that's got my mind thinking of, it would be interesting to see a small like Batman films, like just a detective one rather than like shy away from the action heavy stuff and just be like a detective film. And also Watchmen, although
exactly.
HBO's doing that, but
Which is hopefully what we'll see when Matt Reeves gets his hands on it. So we'll now move on to what's appertaining. And for me, unfortunately not a lot's going on this week. I've been diving into a lot of movies, trying to like expand some of the filmography now that I've got the Oscar season coming out. But recently I've been starting to rewatch Black Mirror with my girlfriend because I've been trying to get her into it. Yeah. She's absolutely adoring it. Loves Nosedive. Loves San Junipero. Is really enjoying it. And I've been just loving going back into it. And we've duly agreed that on Christmas we'll both be sitting down to watch White Christmas.
so good.
One that neither of us have seen and we've now specially saved for Christmas.
I've started Peaky Blinders, which is absolutely brilliant. It's fantastic. Cillian Murphy's great as always.
You wait until Tom Hardy gets there.
Oh, yeah. Have you seen it?
I've seen the first season, yeah.
Yeah. And I also finally finished Tin Star. That was a series that I was watching with my dad. That's why I was slower with it. But it was weird, it was quirky, it left you on the edge of your seat. It was a brilliant series. I cannot recommend Tin Star enough. But apart from that, I've just been watching a few things on the side, just here and there. I've been watching a couple of films. But apart from that...
That's been what's appertaining. Just before we start with Jake's recommendation as well, we're just going to discuss Bargain Bin. I will be reserving my Bargain Bin list until next week, where I'll be bringing to you a Black Friday haul, because I'm going to have a lot to discuss, especially with a certain something I've got hopefully arriving in the mail next week.
With my recommendation of the week this week, I've had a few classics that I've seen years ago built up, and I have a list of them, but I didn't get a chance to actually rewatch any of them. So instead I'm going to go with a small indie film that I watched. It isn't the best film you'll ever see, by far, but some of the shots in this, you can tell that it feels like they've just come out of film school, and they have a checklist of all these different shots, all these fancy shots, and they're just going through one by one, and that's not a criticism. It's just, this film shows what can be made on a budget, and it is the 2016 horror film Shortwave. And it's a science fiction horror film, which is interesting to see because I both love horror and I love science fiction. And then when they merge together, which I think is one of the reasons why I enjoy Black Mirror so much, it creates some interesting concepts. And while this doesn't have the best acting in it, although the two leads are phenomenal, it's just some of the supporting cast that aren't as outstanding. It doesn't have all these big jump scares, it doesn't rely on gore, and while gore is in there, it serves a purpose. And it's because you genuinely care for one character in particular. Well, I personally cared for one character in particular, which made me connect so much with the film. And it's one of those films where after you've seen it, it's a very sort of niche film, and if you enjoyed it while watching it and then you liked what's revealed at the end, then you will instantly want to go back and rewatch it at the start. It's not for everyone, but if you're into science fiction, if you're into horror and you're into... This is very much a slow burner film. It's incredibly well directed. There are a few annoying visual stuff, like the focus is artificial and a few things like that. But for the most part, this is a solid film that deals with some interesting issues and interesting concepts that I would recommend if you're into science fiction and you're into horror. But it's not for everyone.
That's it for this week on the Sour Popcorn Podcast. We'll see you next week with hopefully a review for Justice League.
Justice. I'm very sad because I've noticed a fidget spinner in your screensaver.
Oh god, that's awful.
Why?
That's awful. It's not a fidget spinner. It's kind of a fidget spinner.